First thing I'd like to do is welcome Maysa and also our our good friend Yipeng. And just to, I want you to know that I've met some brave people in my life, activists fighting for their rights. I know people who were at the Oka crisis. I met the Chief Joe Norton, and I've worked with Ellen Gabriel. They were very prominent in the figures in the Oka crisis. I was fortunate enough to meet a man that they called Wolverine. His name was also William Ignace, and he led the protest at in British Columbia. The and I also met uh, people that were involved at the Ipperwash Park uh, standoff as well. Dudley George's family. Dudley George was the common name, and who was shot dead by the Ontario Provincial Police, and so I honor people like Maysa and Yipeng for their courage. You know, what would the world be without such people who are prepared to put their lives on the line for a cause that they believe in about connected to human rights. So I'm very appreciative of your presence here today. I'm, you know, whenever I think about how bloodthirsty the warmongers in Israel are, I need no more proof of it than the day that they shot dead 3 hostages who were approaching them waving white flags, and the IOF fired on them and killed them just like that on 3 unarmed hostages from I don't know how they escaped or what, but they they died by Israeli gunfire. I want to say this at this time that I think we should start today or tomorrow soon to push for a monument in Ottawa that honors the Palestinian children that were that are dead now because of Canadian-made weaponry and Canada's complicity in this genocide. I want to see, you know, for every child who had body parts amputated, um, any child that will never recover emotionally or psychologically from the trauma they're experiencing now, there should be a monument, and I think we should start a letter writing campaign or do some activities, something that's going to start it. You know, at least the seeds of having a monument someday in Ottawa. I think there's going to come a day in the future where Canada will apologize to Palestine for their part in this genocide. I'm hoping that's the case. You know, that's the surely not all the future prime ministers and leaders in Canada are going to be want to just forget about it, because we won't let them forget about it. I've got lots to say about this, and but I want to give a chance, well, you know, for Maysa and to speak and tell us about what she's witnessed and what her hopes are for the future. And you know, we need to understand that if somebody like Pierre Poilievre ever becomes a prime minister, they will just people like Pierre Poilievre will always be under the thumb of the warmongers of Israel. Uh, and all of them are reckless. Carney and Justin Trudeau, who proclaimed himself to be a Zionist, and people like in the States with like Joe Biden and declared himself to be a Zionist, and then people that are mentally ill like Donald Trump. Uh, it's not a ceasefire. There's people getting children still being killed every day in Gaza, and what's happening in the West Bank. I really don't know how the Palestinians are able to endure it without losing their minds, but somehow they do. And so I've got more to say about that later. But for now, I welcome our guest to speak. Miigwech, for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Albert. I feel very humbled to be, in the presence of all of you, and very grateful to be here. And um, living on unceded territories in Canada has been always something I wondered about, as a Palestinian who have witnessed and lived through what colonial oppression feels like in real time. I always wonder about, what it means for me to be a settler in Canada. And there's just so much learning, so much, and so much respect for all of the courage that comes from our brothers and sisters, the Indigenous people of Canada. And I feel such a strong affinity and strong connection because Indigenous people everywhere, I think we know uh, what it feels to have that connection to land, and to feel the threat of that connection being severed every second, every day. So I want to start by acknowledging that, and my deep appreciation and gratitude for being here as part of this circle. Um, so I've been spending a lot of time in Palestine recently for several reasons. My father, who has recently passed away, was getting ill. And so I started spending more time in the West Bank, where I come from, or where I grew up for a big chunk of my life, in a city called Nablus. So I've been spending time for the past 6 months, and every time I come back and have to cross the border, things are just magically getting worse. Um, a little bit about me. I guess I should introduce myself a little bit. So my name is Maysa. I'm Palestinian. I'm Canadian, and I grew up in the diaspora. I grew up actually until I was 11 years old. My parents were not allowed to live in Palestine, so I grew up in Libya until I was 11, and then we moved back to Palestine. And for the first few years of living there, we actually had no legal status. We were illegal on our own land until some really complicated legal proceedings took place, and my parents were able to regain their legal status as citizens in the occupied West Bank. So I moved to Palestine when I was 11, and that would have been in the early 80s. And as soon as I moved, the first Intifada started. So I was in middle school when the first Intifada started. So I was there for that. And at that time, Israel fully occupied the West Bank. So that meant that, healthcare, education, our curriculum was all controlled by the Israeli authorities, administratively, militarily, and otherwise. And so things like saying you're Palestinian or holding a flag or even wearing a keffiyeh at that time were considered illegal. And I remember growing up and there was many raids that took place in the middle of the night, usually by the soldiers, you know, going into people's homes and literally searching, you know, in closets and drawers for a keffiyeh or a flag or a flyer that had anything to do with activism. So I know very well what it feels like to be really oppressed as a young Palestinian woman. A child, I would say at that point, I was still very young. And when I went to university, to study physiotherapy. So I was in Bethlehem University, and it must have been second or third year. I think we were training in one of the big hospitals in Jerusalem. It was called Maqasid Hospital, and it was during that time when there was a big attack by a settler on the Ibrahimi mosque in Hebron, where the settler started shooting people en masse. And so there was a mass casualty situation, and all these young men and women came to Maqasid, the hospital where I was training as a physiotherapist. And I remember what it felt like to be overwhelmed in a hospital that was fully equipped, not like the one in Gaza. So I, as a physiotherapist, not even, graduated, I actually had to scrub in and go into the OR and, help because just there was not enough staff to deal with the mass casualty event. And that was just one incident that occurred. Nothing, nothing compared to what is happening in Gaza. And then I moved to the US and Canada, and I completely shifted my career into more management administration. And so when genocide took place, well, I mean, I should say genocide was always happening in Palestine, but when it was accelerated and it was seen for what it is by most of the courageous people, like everybody here, the all of us, we were like, I felt literally, I felt this fear in my heart. I was like, maybe I'll never get to see Palestine again. Maybe this is the end of what I know as Palestine. And in so many ways, that actually sadly took place. It happened because, as I mentioned, every time I come back, every time I cross that bridge, every time I take the taxi drive from Jericho to Nablus, the several checkpoints, the endless amount of Israeli flags on the roads, just telling us, this is not yours. We're taking it. We're taking it away from you. And all those villages literally caged in with, barbed wire, all the checkpoints to get into cities and out of cities. And it's just incredible that it keeps accelerating. And we literally feel like, the entire world can't do anything to stop Israel. This impunity is just so, to me, it's incredible that it continues to happen. So I guess the work that I do today, because I'm a Palestinian, because I know, the significant impact on people when a genocide happens. I'm actively involved in an organization called Doctors Against Genocide, and our core mission is to center the voices, center the communities that are impacted by genocide. So we focus a lot on the genocide in Gaza, but we also work with communities in Congo, in Sudan, in Rohingya. Sadly, the amount of genocide events continues to accelerate. And again, it seems that we live in a world that allows this to happen. and allows perpetrators to go on with impunity. Um, so we work closely with our colleagues, healthcare workers, and community organizers in Gaza, and we get those real-time updates on what's going on. And today the latest update has been 20 new martyred people in Gaza. This is after the so-called ceasefire. The Israeli forces, they just expanded what is called a yellow line. So they've been, approaching slowly but surely into the west and taking over more land. Yesterday, I spent my evening doing back-to-back interviews with different CBC radio and TV stations. And, they were all asking me about what's happening on the ground. I was like, what we're hearing from our colleagues and our people is that this is a genocide by attrition, meaning that although the bombs are not dropping as frequently as before, but the conditions continue to exist for starvation, for um, having no shelter. 75% of people in Gaza lost their homes, so these people have no shelters. They have, at best, summer tents that are not winterized. Israel continues to prevent winter tents from coming in. Even supplies to winterize those tents, such as tarps or plastic shielding or wood. These items are not allowed in, let alone clothing, warm blankets, things like that. The rainfall, not we've probably all seen the flooding that happened, but the other part of this is that because 70% of people's homes have been destroyed, the infrastructure surrounding all these communities have also been destroyed, which means rainfall mixing with sewer and just mountains of waste that are piling up because no machinery is allowed in. This is creating extreme hazardous conditions for the people in Gaza. And so I guess this is just an introduction of what it's like right now in Palestine. But last week I spent some time in one of the refugee camps in Nablus, Balata camp, which is the largest refugee camp in the West Bank. And I have some pictures to show you. But the night before, there has been a raid on one of the neighborhoods in the refugee camp. It's called Hashashin neighborhood, and I work closely with a center called the Yafa Cultural Center that has a community healthcare clinic. And the community healthcare worker was telling me that because there's just such a prevalence of diabetes and hypertension in the refugee camp, that every time there's a raid in the refugee camp, there's an acceleration or a spike in those levels in diabetes and hypertension because of the stress levels that people have to go through. So I asked to see the houses, if I can actually visit with the people who have been raided. And they took me on a tour, and you'll see the pictures. It looks very dystopian. Not a single house I entered didn't have a picture of a martyred son. 15, 16, 17-year-olds. Every single house. I mean, it's a very dense refugee camp, so the houses, without any attack, they're just completely unhygienic. I went upstairs to see one of the rooms that was, I guess, attacked by the Israelis, and the room didn't have a window, so the air was very rancid. And the woman who was showing me around was pregnant, so I was thinking about wow, pregnant woman living in a refugee camp that is just really hard to exist in on a good day. And then you have to deal with an Israeli force that comes in and starts like breaking things and attacking the men and taking them outside and just interrogating them for whatever reason, right? Like it's arbitrary and it's continuous and it's systemic. And so there's absolutely no wonder that there's a high percentage of diabetics and people with hypertension in the refugee camp and many other issues. So I'll just pause here and see if anybody has questions, and maybe I'll take a break.
Yes, definitely take a break.
Mm.
Albert, do you want to come back in at this point? And oh, you're muted. You have to unmute.
Yeah, miigwech, Maysa, for all that you shared. I was thinking this morning that anyone that has ever spoken the words "every child matters," everyone that has calls themselves a spiritual leader, anyone that has ever claimed to care about human rights, if they're not spiritually outraged and just really outraged for for what Israel is doing, then they need to go back to the center of the circle and try to understand what's what their soul is missing. Something is broken in people who don't care, who tune it out. I don't understand it. It's it boggles my mind, and I'm just in a way it even cripples my mind trying to understand uh, to the degree that people turn their backs. I don't get it. But anyway, I just want to say that, and maybe if Yipeng would mind sharing, that would be good.
I said we wouldn't call on anyone necessarily, but you paying that because we did make you a co-host. Oh, and
That's
Mona
okay.
Lisa is here too. Okay. Yes, Yipeng and then Mona Lisa. Did you want to say something too after Yipeng? Or I have to ask, I have to, I didn't know Mona Lisa was here, so I didn't make her co-host. Hold on. Mona Lisa is another team member. Make co-host for Mona Lisa. There we go. Okay. So now you have to unmute still, Mona Lisa. But
Okay,
okay.
amazing. Surprise, I'm here, right?
Yay! Yay! Yay!
Anyway,
Are you good?
So it's
You're gonna share? Okay, okay, perfect.
I mean I'm good going after Yipeng. That's what I mean. But yeah, hi, hello. Okay.
Now we're gonna have a little like, who's gonna go first? Standing at a stop sign. Yipeng, you're gonna go? Okay, Yipeng and then Mona Lisa. Okay.
Well, thank you for your reflections, Albert, and thank you for just everything that you're doing, Mesa. Um, I was reflecting on like how you opened the circle, Albert, and how much like collective memory that you have and you shared with us, and that there's so much like I think wisdom in how you mentioned Ellen Gabriel, and I had the privilege of finally meeting her in person after sending all these texts back and forth over the past 2 years. And we sat down for dinner when she was in Ottawa for the Palestine Tribunal, like I think 2 days before we sat down for dinner. And there's just like the ways in which we're connecting and sharing that wisdom as a form of like collective resistance to colonial erasure, but colonial violence. It reminds me of, the first time I sat down for dinner with Mesa. And so much of this is this work of someone said, our movement is only as strong and as deep as our relationships. And I'm just seeing the faces, the names in a call like this, and how we've deepened our relationships over the past, 2 years because Palestine has offered this for us, right? And has actually given us so much while it continues to lose everything. And so that's what I'm reflecting on. I'm reflecting on how it's people like Maysa, who, carry the wisdom of her ancestors, but also just like in her own experience of like living in the West Bank and the things that she shared with me, like she's shared with you now, from the first Intifada, um, how much of that kind of radical optimism for, a different world for Palestine, a different world, like Albert has mentioned, for Turtle Island, that we can't, let go of those things. Let that be the the kind of common horizon that we're all like working towards if we truly understand what settler colonialism is. In all these different contexts, that actually creates the conditions for genocide in places that Mesa has mentioned, and not only Palestine, right, but in Sudan, in Congo, and these conditions of genocide are made possible because of colonial violence and tactics that are employed by oppressors and uh, colonists. And um, we have to grapple with these tensions and contradictions where uh, we spoke about this, Albert, with Lisa as well, where we were sitting at the Palestine Tribunal and people were standing next to a Canadian flag in, a Senate building that, has walls and a roof. This building is all on stolen land, unceded, unsurrendered land. And as much as uh, those of us, on this occupied and stolen land in Canada, identify with the struggle for Palestinian resistance, our presence, in many ways, as settlers and as immigrants on stolen land, is much closer to the identity of an Israeli settler in the context of Palestine. And so these, contradictions are up for us to grapple with. But I think one thing I would add to what Mesa said at the beginning is I don't think, and you can correct me wrong here if I'm wrong here, Mesa, like you wouldn't be living on occupied, stolen land if it weren't for your land being occupied as an indigenous person. And so that's why these struggles are also connected, is when we can address the root causes of colonial violence and erasure uh, in many different parts of the world, then we have less of these tensions and contradictions to have to grapple with. Yeah, maybe I'll leave my reflections there.
Beautiful, thank you. Monalisa, did you want to follow? Yeah, you're still muted though. Or frozen. Uh-oh. We'll give it a second. Oh, the online-ness of it. Okay, maybe Maysa, do you want to jump in and then we'll see if Monalisa comes back. When you're done, we'll regroup. Okay, perfect.
Happy to. I would like to share some pictures from my visit to Walata, if that's okay. Not in any particular order, but I took a few pictures and I felt really uneasy actually taking the pictures. In some ways, I felt ashamed to even be a witness of this because I felt, even as a Palestinian who've gone through a lot of oppression, I felt an extreme case of privilege, not having to live in a refugee camp. So I was confronted with that feeling as I was walking through those dystopian roads that I'm about to show you. Like I've been thinking even about identity, what it means to be a Palestinian, Palestinian in a refugee camp versus a Palestinian in the diaspora versus a Palestinian who lives in Ramallah or inside 1948, and all those contradictions and which we feel also in Canada. Exactly, Yipeng, you're absolutely right. I probably wouldn't have move to Canada if my land was free. But first, I want to show you the. So I arrived in the Yafa Cultural Center, and I was greeted by the team because I visit them every time I'm there, and they insisted that we have breakfast together. So this is a traditional Palestinian breakfast. There's hummus. It's pronounced hummus, and it's Palestinian hummus. The cheese to the left is typically made of it's sheep milk. The other plate has something called ful, which is made of fava beans, falafels, and then some tomatoes and peppers and olives, and that's typically what we have for breakfast in Palestine. This is the walk into, as we were walking from the center into the neighborhood that was just attacked, and these are pictures of martyred young men. This is from one family. This is the house that I was mentioning, that I went upstairs to see the destruction. So these children witnessed a night of violence just the night before. I mean, that's the space, the spaces in which people live. No green areas, no open areas. And actually, I don't know if I have it in here, but they showed me a lot of pictures of like bullet holes and other, signs of continuous attack on everything live in the refugee camp. People trying to get warm outside. This is the house that was attacked. So this young man here is a martyr. And it's interesting because Israelis, the people of the refugee camp, they actually create these memorials for the martyrs in public spaces, and the Israelis come in and just destroy them. They don't want to allow people to remember the martyrs for obvious reasons. More of the same. Those two girls, it was very striking to me because what I noticed from them is that although, most children are actually curious, but these kids, these two children, these two girls were almost indifferent. They sat next to me, they were friendly, but they were just like, there's something about their energy that were like, indifferent, and it just completely broke my heart. I kept like talking to them and asking them questions, and they were like answering, but like very, very, very briefly. I've met children from the refugee camp many times, and this time I was struck by how indifferent and how low energy, and it must have been because of the night before, but it just broke my heart to see less spark in their eyes, and it just was really hard. These are pictures you see in a refugee camp. You can see the bullet holes almost every wall. Every wall you'll see those. So that's just a brief overview of what it looks like in the refugee camp. I think it houses 30,000 people with very limited services. UNRWA is completely underfunded, so we were talking to the families. Again, the community health workers, they visit these families, and they take their blood pressure and blood sugar, and those families, obviously the economy is horrible, and they're just they can't afford medication. So UNRWA being underfunded, they can't get medication from UNRWA. And so what these families do when their meds run down, go down, they start rationing on their own. So it's not a sustainable scenario, and yeah, it felt very dystopian being there and knowing that Israel systemically attacks refugee camps because they're, part of the problem for them is that the refugee camps is a reminder of, what happened, what took place, the occupation. So they want to completely erase them. And they continue to do this by attacking, killing, making life impossible, banning UNRWA. I think there was a recent decision to not allow the offices, the UNRWA offices, to use any electricity or water. So it's just choking the people in every way possible. Yeah, that's, I guess I'll pause.
Okay.
Monalisa's back.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was trying to put my headset on and I think it froze the computer. That's the glitch that happened. Thank you so much for being here. I kind of did the little like creep background work and I have been like, oh, I've definitely seen you speak before. And something you had just said a couple of minutes ago is the privilege as a Palestinian being raised in like North America, having the privilege to not experience refugee camps and how you show it to us. And I've been to Jordan. I lived in Jordan for 3 years of like my adolescence, and I had cousins living in more of these, I wouldn't say refugee-ish areas, but they have that kind of like vibe to it. So I understand the privilege that we have here as Palestinians, as people of education, as people who've studied these different intersectionalities in such complex ways, that we have a duty to resist and help assist Palestinians wherever they are in like their right to self-determination. And we're seeing it right now that their health is being affected, because when you mentioned that every single time they're raided, you see a spike in both diabetes and hypertension. What? So thank you so much for sharing that and for sharing with us your experience of being able to like go to Palestine, to be in the West Bank, because like Palestinians like myself, we don't get that privilege often. So thank you.
Thank you.
Albert, do you want to take another turn now? Does that work?
Yep. Just say this quickly. I wonder why the United Nations isn't doing more, and is it possible for groups like ours to push for Canadian politicians to contact the United Nations to at least have the cities, major cities in the Western world, to have monuments for the children who are dead because of the leadership in these, were members of the United Nations. Just want to say that.
Maysa, do you want to?
I just have one more thing to add in
Okay.
the sense of, sorry, I know, I'm just
No,
like,
that's
hi.
good. That's perfect.
When Albert said that the UN isn't doing anything, it's not that they're not doing anything. It's that at its inception, the UN is a colonial entity. Its foundation is rooted in all of the findings. And it was more, to sanction European on European violence, as opposed to, because while they were doing the UN, the violences in Africa were going on, the colonization and exploitation of these communities as well. So it's in their best interest, from at their inception, that their countries are colonial as like their history, that the UN is operated from that lens, as much as they open up different foundations. And this is me speaking to different UN interests, which UN friends who told me that as much work as they put into the system, there's some immovable cogs that people like, this is not the way we do things. And it just continues to support things like the IMF and then the money banks, which perpetually maintain consistent poverty in these communities as well, because they're heavily in debt to God knows which colonial country to begin with. But yeah, just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I agree, Monalisa. I think just the recent UN Security Council decision that was adopted by the peace plan, the American peace plan, they call it. It just tells us that the UN does not work for the people; it works for the masters, right? The member states who control it are the US and their allies, and that UN Security Council decision has basically handed over Gaza to the Americans, to another colonial entity. So it's really a reimposition of colonial systems all over again, and has thrown away the ICJ, provisional measures, the ICJ decision or opinion on the illegality of the occupation of the Palestinian land. All that went out the window in order to appease the US and approve this horrific peace plan. So I agree. The UN has not been created to defend the people, although there are elements of international humanitarian law, but they somehow magically continue to be ignored. Depends on who's the perpetrator. And in this case, it's the US and Israel, and Canada is complicit in allowing and enabling. And sadly, we live in a country that is supports the impunity of Israel above anything else.
And that's one of the things when people, when I was having a discussion with someone about the cost of pricing properties, and I had said this would easily be solved if people stopped buying properties and saying that because this is technically settler land, we have no right to it. So by not buying properties, the cost of everything would go down. And right, but it's not as simple as that. It's a little more nuanced. But we have these elements of the parallels that mirror us is like what the occupation is 200 years of what Canada is now to the previous Indigenous communities, and the prolonged occupation and expansion, and what Palestine is a fraction of what Turtle Island is, and like expansion. So we know it's a bulwark in a way, and then you look at the active participation of Middle Eastern and Gulf countries, either through they're financially tied to government corporations or their investors are foreign. It really is down to the people to in the way we use our dollars. So I really emphasize the boycott, divest, and sanction movement is probably the one way we can cripple these systems, because they really rely on our money. But if we remove our money and put it back into our community, you'll see, I hope we'll see a lot of changes. But I think that's the aspiration for whatever we want in the future, is to see a world where healthcare is free. People aren't starving. There's no homelessness. Poverty is like, we want these things, but it's not as simple as like picket line fences. No, it needs to be implemented on strategic policy levels by the people, for the people, I guess. Anyway, sorry, get off my soapbox.
Thank you. Thank you. And one quick comment Yipeng put in. Israel was created by the UN by a resolution in 1947, is at the root cause of the settler colonial project in Palestine. Yeah. Do you want to expand on that, Yipeng, or is that good? And
Yeah.
okay. And then we'll go to Sylvia after. Perfect.
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. I mean, I was just thinking, what Francesca Albanese has also said, that the UN is not this thing that has this moral righteousness and this divine entity that kind of oversees everything, even though sometimes people kind of refer to it as such. It's just a creation of its member states. And the member states are these countries and states around the world that have committed and continue to commit like atrocious human rights violations. All the while, they're members of this institution that has these really nice words, has these, like nice buildings where these nice words are displayed. And there's a sense of like diplomacy of coming to these places and saying all the nice things, saying the things that people want to hear, and then doing things that are completely not in alignment with whatever they're saying. And so sometimes people say, okay, we need to hold the UN to account and hold the UN to account. But holding the UN to account means holding the member states to account because it's only created by member states. Their operations is only existing and their legitimacy is only so far as member states respecting their jurisdiction, which we see many member states choose not to even respect their jurisdiction and recommendations because we don't have an international government. It's not the way that the world works because we have authoritarian dictatorships in many different parts of this world, and their people are oppressed. Their people do not even have a say in what direction, policy and foreign policy goes in. So absolutely, we have to hold the UN to account, but that is through holding our own governments to account. And I do think when we live in a place like Canada where dissent is somewhat allowed, even though it is still being, crushed and repressed in the context of Palestine in many ways. But if we don't exercise the rights that we do have, we cease to lose them, and this has been the case in many different contexts. We just have to look a little bit south of the border, but still remembering, I think, I was hearing this new thing that was introduced to be like a reformist to like, no, we need to change the system, but like that changing the system is like also not enough because we have to have I think, at least for me, as someone who has like leftist politics, but also abolitionist politics, and decolonial politics of we are still pushing for land back for Turtle Island, right? So like it is um, understanding the role of pushing these systems and institutions, but know that they will not bring liberation. The electoral politics in Canada will not bring liberation for Turtle Island. It is through the work of people like Albert, people like Ellen, who have people here like who have pushed for the direct actions, for pushing for collecting the people power, mobilizing the people power to be able to move towards liberation, as we are seeing in the context of Palestine as well. But it takes many forms, and it's generational work, as I'm also reminded, we hope within our lifetimes we see the things that are necessary, but we also have to temper, I think, ourselves in that the work that we do is also for the generations down the line that might see the benefits of it.
Very beautiful. Thank you. Sylvia?
I'm just thinking of how I'm being nurtured by these by the talks and the speaking, and it reminds me that the more we know about cultures that aren't European, that more that we know about specifically Indigenous peoples and the ways that so many of them have been able to hang on. It's very, very difficult, but those ways of knowing what real democracy is, democracy from the bottom up, I think we're really going to have to try as hard as we can to protect those most vulnerable peoples and those populations. This includes Palestine, Palestinians, it includes all of them planetarily, because the knowledge is there. We just have to get rid of our ignorance and protect and nurture. But I digress. I have one specific question to ask Maysa or anyone else here who might know. And last week I was reading about how Israel is trafficking tired, worn out Palestinians who just want to be in a space where they can breathe. They're actually trafficking them to other countries, and there is no accountability process in them. There is no, like, they're literally being disappeared. And that was only one article that I read, and I just wonder if anyone here has any other information on that.
I don't have very specific information, but I know that there has been several cases of Palestinians disappearing Palestinians using an airport called the Ramon Airport, which is not too far from Gaza, actually. It's in the south of Palestine. And this last case just happened to be found out because it arrived in South Africa and there was no documentation whatsoever. But there's been other cases like this. And actually, Benjamin Netanyahu just recently, like I think less than a week ago, he was asking the Egyptian government to take Palestinians out. That was literally what he was saying, asking them, why wouldn't you take Palestinians out? So obviously what Israel's trying to do is to empty the land from the people so that they can take control over the land. So they will create every condition to make life impossible and force people to leave. The other thing to note is that everybody who is disappeared this way, again, I don't have the specifics, but they are asked to sign a piece of paper that says if you leave, you cannot come back, which is standard operating procedure, I guess, to make sure that their ethnic cleansing project actually works. So these people who are, like you said, tired and exhausted, and they've just seen more trauma than anyone can imagine, they just want to see, the light at the end of the tunnel and be safe for a change. So this is not voluntary immigration. This is forced displacement. And, if it's not stopped, it will continue to happen. And actually, this reminds me of a story that my mother told me, who is a Nakba survivor in 1948. My mother was born in Haifa, a city on the coast of the Mediterranean in north of Palestine. And she described to me what happened. It wasn't the Israelis then, it was the British. Because Palestine was a British colony at the time. She said that her father wasn't at home, but her mother, she had to take her and her four other siblings, and they were told to get on this ship that was, in Haifa, and they were told that, don't worry, we're just gonna send you like somewhere close. And so they took these families, and my mother was one of them, and they took them to Akka, which is a city just north. And then this was repeated again. They were taken again from Akka to Lebanon. So they ended up in Saida, in Lebanon, and then they had to find their way back to Nablus, I think a year after. So this is what happened. They were told, it's just temporary, don't worry. And of course, it's forced displacement, it's ethnic cleansing, and it's allowing the Israelis to take over. So,
Wow. Albert, did you want to come back in at this point?
I just want to say this, that my dad believed that every now and then you need to turn around and see what you've been up to in life, and what you did that was honorable and what you did that was dishonorable. And if you did something dishonorable, you try to fix it. And so it makes me think now about Canada, the United States, and Britain, and Egypt even. Those countries that when they turn around at some point and see how they were involved in this ethnic cleansing, and how they're going to feel about it, how their citizens are going to feel about it, it's just going to be shame, shame, shame.
And Monalisa, did you want to? I felt like you maybe put your hand up a conversation ago. Oh, you're muted still. Okay.
I did when you were talking about the Palestinians who were like kidnapped almost to South Africa and just surfaced. I was going to add something else, but I can't remember. because a whole new point of like things came in. So we'll loop back when I remember. I'll just put up my hand.
Okay.
No
Okay,
worries.
do that, and we'll bring you in.
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. Maysa, back to you for another thought. Does that work?
I'm happy to listen, actually. That's okay. If
Okay.
anybody else wants to share or any other
Okay, there
thoughts.
were a couple things. Let me see what I missed in the chat. When Sylvia was speaking, there was a comment about Indigenous governance, yes. Someone who had to go and saying thank you, someone who's saying they can stay. And an interesting comment here. So someone who earlier said they had to go wrote again now to say, seems as if I can stay for this entire Zoom since Moncton is setting up for the Santa Claus parade in our weekly City Hall space. Strange juxtaposition between the Jolly Holly fantasy and actual genocide. And I should say the City Hall space is because they do a weekly rally for Palestine here in Moncton, New Brunswick, in that space. So that space has been pushed aside today for the Christmas parade. Yeah. And then Sylvia said thank you for that explanation. That's all. So feel free, more friends, to write in the chat if you want to. It kind of is a good time for that. But Monalisa, you remembered?
No, actually, I'm not going to remember that, but I do have a question for Maysa, though. Like I said, I had done some, previously, but I had come across a point of where you had mentioned you'd witnessed a lot of like trauma, like things that you would consider by regular person standard as traumatizing. My question actually for this was, where did I put you? How do you navigate the different emotional and ethical way of witnessing like mass atrocities through like a medical lens? Like how do you explain to people what you witnessed without trying to like without breaking composure? Because I find every so often, no matter how strong someone is, you experience such internal turmoil of like witnessing so much violence, so much atrocities, and not from like a doctor's perspective or humanitarian AIDS perspective, but just from like a genuine human being.
What an interesting question. Like in the case of this genocide, like the first 6 months, I was in total like, I was dysfunctional. I had panic attacks, and it took me a while to actually come back to some sort of like some form of normalcy. But when I was growing up in Palestine, and yeah, I did witness a lot of trauma. I was almost shot a few times. I've seen my friends get shot in front of me. I've seen a lot of people get killed. But the one thing that was even stronger than all of that was the sense of community that I was part of. I was part of a very strong community network, and that keeps you going. That keeps you going because it's not about me. It's about the people. And, once we understand that, then, our personal experience actually fades in comparison to others. And it's not because, this is not the definition of greatness by no means, but it's really understanding that it's not about me. And when I share these stories, and it took me a while to actually get to a point where I can share these stories and not fall apart. It's not about me. It's about the stories. It's about the people. It's about that responsibility to tell the story as best as I can. And I'm not always the best at doing it, but trying to stay true to the story and to the experience of the people. And at Doctors Against Genocide, we talk about centering the voices of the survivors of genocide, and it's really not about us, it's about them. And like whenever we come up with a campaign or design some sort of a new initiative, it's really with the people. It's listening deeply and understanding what they need. And so I would say the only way to do it that I know how is to make it not about me. And it's about, that responsibility to tell the story that will compel someone to take action, not just to listen and not that just to consume the trauma, because we can get into the cycle of like we consume trauma, like we see it on social media all the time. It's there, it's easy to see and witness and consume, but it's the compelling to action that is important. And that's the distinction. Like, that's where I feel I want to get better, right? All the time, through stories I share or, sentiments or anything I talk about.
I'm sorry, just have more, just to follow up in the context of community, because I know we're, but what forms of pressure, or policy actions have the highest potential to like shift the situation? Like, what approaches do you think we should take as a community? Because you mentioned community is such an important factor, and I agree. So what forms of pressure, in addition to the ones we're currently taking, should we participate in?
I mean, I would actually, I'll share the experience from the Intifada, because it was remarkable actually what was achieved in the first Intifada. It was actually civil disobedience. That's what we did. The communities organized, they were extremely organized, and there was a lot of casualty, a lot of sacrifice. However, the communities came together, women. There was like women committees, there was like, healthcare workers, there were teachers, everybody organized. And we carried out an amazing civil obedience movement that almost got us there. Almost, because I say almost because we all know what happened with Oslo, and we were co-opted because of bad players. And, and then we're paying, unfortunately, the people are paying the price of that huge mistake. But I would say civil disobedience. But are we ready? Are we there yet? Are we that organized? We have so much work to do, but I know Yipeng has a lot of things to say about that from an abolitionist perspective. I'm really curious to hear your perspective.
Please, your perspective.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like Maysa knows my perspective. I think she wants other people to hear my perspective. I think as organizers, as people who, there are first-time organizers because of Palestine, which is also quite tremendous. That Palestine has been the thing that mobilized them to be like, hey, maybe I can do something and do it with other people, and we're gonna just do something. And but I agree wholeheartedly with Maysa, like that, to compel people into action. But it also has to be strategic and also has to be effective. And it also has to be, are we going to that same common horizon of abolition? And sometimes we're not. Sometimes that's okay. People need to make their own mistakes. They need to learn and grow. But it's also frustrating because there are lives on the line, and in fact, there's always been lives on the line when you're organizing with and centering people who are experiencing colonial erasure and violence. So it can be hard to have patience to wait for people to get more organized or to wait for people to strengthen their political analysis. And I think that's the other component is not only do I want people like Maysa to compel them to action, but we also need to sharpen people's political analysis, right? That the ways in which we get things done is civil disobedience, is direct action, is protest, is all these things. But where does the other things fit in, right? The letter writing, the meeting with members of parliament, the organizing around an election. Yes, those are important things, but it fits into a broader politic that I hope people get to. And it's not just hope, it's like constantly having those conversations and doing the education and sometimes hand-holding people from one part of the spectrum to the next and trying to and once people's, I think, politics are sharpened and also their philosophy of the world that is like, I have a role to play, then only can you have people be well organized enough and going towards that common horizon towards liberation, right? Not reform, not,
Not a peace council.
scraping for breadcrumbs. Like that's what I'm seeing with a lot of organizing these days. And yes, it's important to celebrate the small wins, but that's different than settling for breadcrumbs. And I think I'm with a group of people that understand this well when we look at what truth and reconciliation and reparations and land back looks like on Turtle Island. Like there's so much more to truly demand and to not settle for breadcrumbs, but you know, we can get into a whole conversation about why people are settling for breadcrumbs.
Amazing. Thank you. So much learning. Albert, do you want to jump back in now? It's already 1:12, so we, have about 20 minutes. We did have a video we wanted to share. Albert and I talked about this earlier today, that our other friend and team member, Diana Ralph, couldn't be here today, but her speech at the Vigil for Palestinian Children, I thought might be something good to kind of show at the end. Do you think I should do that now, Albert? Is that a good? Okay, so we'll play that. And this is the event that I met Maysa at, and went and spoke to Maysa afterwards and explained the Harmony Circle and invited her to be a guest at an upcoming one when we could get ourselves organized. So yeah, I have, let me remember, I always have to talk through things. So I have to share it. Oh wait, first I'm gonna go over here and make sure I'm on the right screen. Okay, I have it queued up there, good. And I have to share it with sound or else we can't hear it. Okay, so yell out if it's not working or if anything's going wrong, but so this is 5 minutes and then that might take us to a good place for Albert to close, I think. But okay. Why can I not hit play there? Okay, yell out if it's not working.
Thank you all who organized this important vigil, and all of you who are standing here for humanity and justice for the children of Gaza. As a devout Jew, I have 3 messages for you. 1, Judaism values life, justice, compassion, honesty, and generosity. We treasure all children as pure, beautiful, and inherently worthy of being nurtured and protected. 2, what Israel is doing to the children of Gaza and to all Palestinians since 1948 and before violates everything I cherish about Judaism. Zionism is not Judaism. From its inception, Israel has been a violent, racist, settler colonial apartheid state which oppresses Palestinian people, and it is continuing to perpetrate genocide. 3, blaming Jews for Israel's crime is anti-Semitic. Jews, like all other people, don't deserve to be blamed or attacked. But criticizing Israel's crimes is not anti-Semitic. Opposing and stopping these crimes is a moral obligation for everyone, and especially for Jews. This is the month of Elul, when Jews prepare for the high holidays. It is a time when we Jews take communal responsibility before God for the wrongs we collectively have committed. We apologize, beg forgiveness, do what we can to repair the damage we have caused, and commit to return to an ethical path. Many Jews oppose what Israel is doing, but to the extent that we have ever colluded with and benefited from Israel's behavior, Jews have a special responsibility to oppose and apologize for Israel's crimes. Similarly, as a Canadian and also as a social worker, I also have a responsibility to apologize for my government, which so critically supports Israel's crimes. So, with deep contrition and remorse, I chant a Vidui, a confession to God, to you, and to the children of Gaza and their parents for the sins that the Israeli government is committing in our name. Since 2007, we have held 2 million Gazan people under siege, most of them already Nakba refugees, denying them life's essentials and waging ongoing military attacks on them. We have imprisoned and tortured many thousands of Palestinians, including children, without charge or due process. We have destroyed their homes, schools, hospitals, water treatment plants, trees, and food. Since 2023, we have starved, wounded, bombed, traumatized, and killed all of Gaza's children and their parents. We have literally committed ecocide, destroying the very land itself. We have tried to justify these crimes by demonizing innocent civilians, including infants and small children, as Hamas terrorists. We have called those who speak out for justice for Palestinians, we call them anti-Semitic in order to silence, discredit, and criminalize them. We have imprisoned and killed journalists, students, and activists who tried to expose those crimes. For all these crimes and sins, I, along with many other Canadian Jews, deeply apologize. We stand in solidarity with Palestinians and commit to do whatever we can to stop Israel's genocidal atrocities and to repair the damage done in our name. I will close with a prayer we Jews recite on Yom Kippur, our holiest day. The words mean, "For all these sins, God of forgiveness, please forgive us, pardon us, and help us atone." And I want to invite any of you, all of you, to help say this prayer with me, and as we do, you can pound your chest, just to help take responsibility for the fact that we have not managed to stop this yet. And here's the song. Ve'al kulam Elohai salichut Salach lanu mehalanu kaper lanu. Thank you.
So I just thought that might be a nice thing to share. And Albert, do you want to?
Yeah, I was looking at an oak tree the other day, and you might know something about the oaks, is that some oak trees never lose their leaves. Their leaves stay attached to the branches of the tree. And in the springtime, the new leaf, the bud, will push the old leaf away, and a new leaf becomes present. And whenever I think about that, and I think about Gaza and the Palestinians, and how the Palestinians who will survive the genocide, they will be like that oak leaf, and keep a safe place for the next generation, and act almost like a midwife or a supporter, and where that new generation will find peace and wellness in their lives, in their own lands, because it's going to be very difficult for such a thing to happen, because from what I see, I can't see the day where Israel's going to let up. The warmongers of Israel are never going to let up. I've said it before, that they are like vampires whose bloodlust for Palestinian blood is never going to be pacified. They're going to thirst for it as long as there's a Palestinian in Gaza or the West Bank. They'll want that blood, and they'll do whatever they can to get it, to do it. And to me, that's what I see. Sorry to end on a note like that, but to me, it's the truth that we have to come to terms with. How do we stop it? The world leaders are cowards. They're supporters of genocide. They say they don't want it happening in this country or that other country, but somehow they're okay with it with Israel doing it though. And it's senseless. It's spiritually enraging. It's outrageous. I just, you know, I go to my prayer circle in the forest here, and I try to think about something that can be done. And it's, I really don't see much hope yet. There's, I guess, there's still a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, but we need to try to make that light brighter. You know, not just for ourselves, but for the future of humanity. That's how I think about it. If there's any time left, I'd like people to make comments about what I just said or whatever. Please do.
I'd like to comment if that's okay. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. That reference to the oak tree and holding a safe space. It's so beautiful. And yes, it feels hopeless and dire and dark and dystopian and really quite ugly, to be honest. But I always refer back to a part of a poem in Arabic that says, إذا الشعب يوما أراد الحياة فلا بد أن يستجيب القدر. It means that if the people want to live or want life, then destiny will have to bend. It's really all about the people. And I think, you know, Gaza has paid a huge sacrifice, but in so many ways, it has woken up so many of us. The whole world looks different because of what happened in Gaza. For the Palestinians in diaspora, it saved us. It connected us together to hold safe spaces for each other and to be part of, broader communities. And, this circle is a great example. I wouldn't have never been part of this circle if it weren't for Gaza. So in so many ways, Gaza has saved us and it brought us together. Yes, the price is so, so, so steep and continues to break our hearts every second. But I feel, there's so many of us now that are awake. And once you're awake, you're never going to go back to not seeing or unseeing. We will always know the truth. And, Palestinians have a disease called hope, and we're just hopeful people. We can't help it. It's just who we are, and we're grateful for that part, that community, and to be part of that community. Monalisa's laughing. Do you agree with our disease?
Hope. I'm like, yep. I'm really hopeful in any situation. I'm like, wait, there is a silver lining. I know there is. I get it. And I think I think now, after meeting a bunch of Palestinians and their allies, and we rubbed off on a lot of people, like they're like, ain't no bravery like Palestinian bravery. And I think someone had said there's no women like a Palestinian woman in regards to just the trials and tribulations of what we've experienced emotionally, spiritually, physically, whether it's through intergenerational trauma or our communities, is that we really have this, like, I mean this in the sense of like women right now in our community are such leaders to like the future of what Palestinians and what Palestine is going to look like, because it's this because there's no one more plugged into communities like the village that we are, right? Because it takes a villager to be part of a village. So yeah, I agree. Hope is a sickness, but I feel it's rubbed off on a lot of people. Like you said, we wouldn't be here with so many beautiful people who've participated so aggressively for the last 2 years, even to a detriment to themselves, to get us to a place where Palestine has such an aggressive foothold at a table it never was given space or a chance to be at. So I think I was talking to someone yesterday who said, if you had told me 10 years ago, Palestine or the movement would be what it is now, I would have laughed in your face and walked away, because the most we had known was like demonstration, an occasional flag waving. But seeing the flag waving last week for a lot of Palestinians was like emboldened them to be more courageous, to lobby more aggressively, because we have acknowledgement on Turtle Island from officials. So our claim to Palestine's self-determination is now really hot. Like we should really. So yeah, I agree. Essentially, thank you so much. يعطيك العافية.
One more comment to read in the continuing saga of the Moncton gathering. Carol ended with, well, seems our little Citizens for Peace Greater Moncton group is going ahead with our rally, wearing keffiyehs before the Santa Parade actually rolls out. Thank you all for these important Harmony Circle gatherings from my former city. Blessings and keep showing up for justice and peace. So that is a hopeful story to end on too, I think. But Albert, is everyone okay? We try to stay on time. It's 1:27. Normally it's because we don't want to get too late into people's bedtimes, but we should probably just try to stick to it anyways, even though it's midday. Albert, do you want to go? Maysa, do you want to say any last minute?
No, I was just laughing because you said bedtime. It is 9:30 here. So,
True.
I mean,
Your time. We have to respect your bedtime. Yes, that is a good point. Thank you. Okay, we're very good. We got 2 minutes. Albert, it's over to you.
Yeah. You know what motivates me in human rights and things like what we're talking about is I look at my grandchildren and now my great grandchild, and I imagine in my mind's eye what's happening in Gaza, West Bank, and other places, and if that was happening to my grandchildren and my grandchild, and how I would feel and how I would want the people of the world to respond to stop what my family was going through. So that's what motivates me. And I don't know if it's the mind of a poet that I can literally feel their pain, and I'm serious. You know, when I say that, I can feel it in my heart. What people in Gaza right now are feeling. It's really just I don't know. I think of humanity and what's left of it, and we need to put it in a different gear, you know, to salvage what we can and rebuild humanity, that hope of human beings and the kindness in the human heart. Just wanted to say that to end, and I wish everybody well, and God bless everyone.
Thank you. And that is it.
thank you so
Maysa,
much.
thank you for joining from far away in a different time zone.
Miigwech, Maysa.
Thank you.
Miigwech, Yipeng.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
I'm bad at hanging up till like everyone hangs up. So I will stop recording though, but I hate hanging up on people. So
Sure.